Greetings. I'm Steve Cole, the pastor of the First Methodist Church in Oswego, Kansas, and the West Mineral Methodist Church in West Mineral, Kansas. And today we're going to be having a sermon for February 4th, 2024. And we're looking at a passage about the people getting ready to cross over into the Promised Land. From Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 to 6. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the Israelites. Every place that your sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea in the west, shall be your territory. No one shall be able to stand against you for all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall put this people in possession of the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. May God add a blessing to the reading, the hearing, and the understanding of His Word. The people have been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. A whole generation of people has died off, and so has Moses. And so the people, no doubt, are kind of afraid. And God tells Joshua, be strong and courageous. That they're about to do something new. I counted 5 times in the book of Joshua that God says, be strong and courageous. You know, anytime something is new in our lives, it can be a little frightening. The first day of school, the first day at a new job, first day at a new church, a new child being born, possibly even the first day of retirement. Might be a little scary because what is the future going to hold? I kind of remember my first day of high school. It was kind of scary because, see, up to this point, I'd lived in a small town, and we had our own little grade school and junior high, and I went to school with basically the same group of kids all the way from kindergarten up through what was then 9th grade. And now we were going to go to high school with a lot of other kids that grew up and had gone through other schools, grade schools, and another junior high, kids that I did not know. And now I was being thrown into this big pool, we might say, and found out that a lot of the kids that I grew up with were not in the classes that I was in. So I was having to go to new classes and meet new people. But, made it. And, of course, there's always the first day of going anywhere. Can be like that. Yeah. Besides that, none of my friends played football. But I played football. And so I didn't know any of the other people on the football team. I had to get to know all of them. And the other thing was I was following in the footsteps of an older brother who was pretty good at football. And they wondered, is he going to live up to being the kind of football player his brother was? Well, no, not really. But still, it's hard to follow in somebody's footsteps. And that's what Joshua was doing. He was going to be following in the footsteps of Moses. Moses had led the people across the Red Sea out of slavery, through in Egypt, and led them for 40 years. Now, Joshua is taking over. He's been the number 2 guy, but now he's in charge, and that can be kind of scary. Why did they choose Joshua? Well, because Joshua, if we remember back, they sent 12 spies into the land, and they scoped it out. That was 40 years before this. Of the 12 spies, 10 of them said, we can't do it. The people are too big. The cities are too fortified. But Joshua and Caleb said, we can do it with the Lord's help. And so the people had to wander in the wilderness for 40 more years. And only Joshua and Caleb were the ones left from their generation that were able to go into the promised land. It's hard to follow somebody that's been a popular leader. We can imagine what it might have been like way back when Roy Williams had to follow Larry Brown at KU. And then Bill Self had to follow Roy Williams. Can you imagine? Each one of them very good in their own right. But they've all proven themselves, haven't they? Yeah. And it's hard for a new pastor to come along and follow in the footsteps, especially if a pastor was well liked. And to come along and follow along. And I've been there a few times. Had to follow in the footsteps of somebody that was well liked. And you hear a lot of things, oh, when Pastor so-and-so was here, things were, so much better. Yeah, it's not easy sometimes to do that. Yeah. It's hard to follow someone who's done a good job, and Joshua has this to do. But he does something kind of along the same lines of what Moses did. God tells them to go ahead and cross the Jordan River. Now, the Jordan River really isn't that big. It's fairly deep, but it's not very wide. But see, and they were told, cross the Jordan into what was going to be the promised land. Well, how are they going to get across? And it was flood stage. So there could have been a mile across. How are they going to get across? Well, God says, get the Ark of the Covenant, have the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant down to the river, and the river will part. Kind of like what happened with Moses in the Red Sea. The same type of miracle was performed, and they went across on dry land. Well, then when they got into the land, they found out, as they said earlier, the cities were fortified. There was a place called Jericho that had these huge walls. How in the world are they going to defeat all those people in Jericho? And of course we know the story, how they had to go around the city several times and then blow their trumpets and the walls came tumbling down. Yep. We know that story, that God helped them as they went along. There are probably some people that said, you got to be kidding me. How are we ever going to do this? But they did it. And just so happened that Moses sent a couple men ahead before this. And they went into the city and they were hiding. They were scoping it out. There happened to be a woman named Rahab that hid them. And because she did that, she and her family was saved when the Jericho fell. Now, what happened to this Rahab? She was called Rahab the harlot. What happened? Well, she married a man named Solomon, who was the father of a man named Boaz, and Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Where have we heard her name before? Okay. And Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of King David. How about that? Yeah. And of course, Jesus was of the family line of David, right? But you go clear back to here, to this particular point. Wow. God helps people take possession of the land, and they bring peace for them for a while. The land is divided, and among the 12 tribes, and things are looking good. And Joshua has to remind them of something. We go clear on ahead to Joshua 24, chapter 24. And he says, now revere the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness, and put away the gods of your ancestors and that you served beyond the river in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now, if you're unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in the land of the living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. They're told that they need to serve the Lord. We know, of course, they had their times, their moments, when they wandered away, but God always let them come back. Yeah. We are kind of like that. Thing is going good, we have a tendency to kind of go off on our own and do our own thing, but when a challenge comes along and things get scary, we come back to God, right? Yep. Joshua also gives them a warning. If they don't worship God and go after other gods, there will be consequences. And then, of course, we know. If we read through the Old Testament, we find out that there were consequences that were brought upon the people for following other gods. You know, some people say that this story is about victory. Well, partly, but also it's about our faith. Having faith that God is going to get them through, that God promised them that he would do this, and he did. That they needed to be faithful and have faith in God. God said he would get them across the river, and he did get them across the river. God said the walls would come tumbling down, and they did come tumbling down. Just as God told Joshua, I will never leave you or forsake you, Jesus told his disciples that he would never leave them, that he would be with them always, even to the end of the age, right? But also this story of the crossing the river Jordan can be used kind of as a metaphor. Metaphor for what God has in store for us. He talks about going to the promised land, and that's crossing the river into the promised land. Well, that Jesus talked about, I'm going to prepare a place for you, right? And that we will go to be with him. And that's kind of what we kind of have the analogy of crossing the river and going to the promised land as when we go to be with the Lord. And that is for us. And so we have this same analogy, and we have songs that we sing sometimes that kind of use that. Ones like, Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand, right? Or Shall We Gather at the River? Yeah. It talks about that. And then the song, Because He Lives. It says, one day I'll cross the river. I'll fight life's final war with pain. So, yeah. Use that same analogy of swimming. But also, it's an analogy, too, of coming to faith in Jesus Christ. That we're leaving the wilderness of our life behind and going into a relationship with God. That we're already part of the promised land. Now, doesn't mean we don't have battles to fight, and that's kind of true here too. The people, even though they crossed over into the promised land, they had battles to fight. God helped them, but they still had challenges ahead in their life. That God was going to be with them to do that. And that's the same thing for us as we come against various different challenges in our life. God is with us to help us as we go through those challenges. And two, one day, we too will cross the river. That we will cross into the promised land. That Jesus says, I have prepared a place for you. And that's what we can look forward to. Well, thank you for being here with me today. I hope that this may have been a blessing, and hope that you can continue to know that God goes with us to guide us, lead us, and help us today and every day. Amen.